Hey, what's up, VC? It's Steve again, Harmless Rebel, and it's time for another hard rock and heavy metal update. I've been slacking on the updates lately. I've just had a lot going on. So let's just kind of jump in. First off, in the background, we're listening to a thrash, an absolute thrash classic. This is Weapons of Our Warfare from Deliverance. This is the Rock's Records pressing, which I believe just sold out. They did black vinyl and blue. I missed the blue vinyl literally I went to buy it, hesitated. When I went back like the next day or 2 days later, it was gone. So I ended up getting the black vinyl. But let's just kind of jump in. I've had that for a year and a half or so. So jump into the new stuff. First, a couple of people have shown this. I'm going to show it too. This is the Krokus repress set that was put out by Back on Black. These were actually put out a few years ago, 2003, 2004. I don't know if they just didn't sell well or what the case was, but they bundled them up. And it's 5 albums for, I think it was $32. And if you're an Amazon Prime member, free shipping. So, I mean, how do you pass that up? You got the Blitz, which is on white vinyl. Metal Rendezvous, which is, it looks white, but it's actually clear vinyl. One Time, or One Vice at a Time, orange vinyl. Hardware, yellow vinyl. And then Headhunter on red vinyl. And these are all really nice gatefolds. The original front cover, original back cover. And then they all have the lyrics on the gatefold. Back on Black did a really good job. They all sound really good. I actually had all of these but Metal Rendezvous. That was one that I never ran across. And then it's funny, as soon as I bought this, I ran across like 3 copies of it. I don't know how that happens. It's just one of those things with collecting, you know? So we got those. Then I've been finding some really good deals on Amazon. A lot of this stuff I bought for like $5 or $6 on Amazon. So like $8 or $9 shipped. Or not Amazon, I'm sorry, on eBay. So this is one of them. This is Accept, self-titled. And this one is kind of funny. It says made in West Germany. And then it's got the German symbol on the vinyl itself. But then it's got a sticker on the back that says made in Holland. So I don't know what the deal is with that. But I paid $5 for this. It's in mint condition. Killer album too. This one I found at a used store for like $3 or $4. And this is an upgrade copy. This is Virgin Killer from the Scorps. I also picked up another copy of Dynasty from Kiss. The reason I picked this one up is it's got the CRC stamp on the back for the Columbia House Record Club, but it also has the poster in there, which is weird because most of the Columbia House stuff doesn't come with posters. But the main reason I bought this was I was missing the poster. I've got a really clean copy of Dynasty already. However, it only had the order form. It was missing the poster, so I pretty much bought this for the poster. This is another one I got really cheap on eBay, like $8 shipped. Innocence is No Excuse from Saxon. One of the later 80s Saxons I was missing. This one right here is an ass kicker. This one is Frank Marino's Juggernaut. Picked this one up for really cheap. I think this is probably Frank Marino's heaviest album. At least it's the heaviest one that I've heard. This one doesn't have that, the guitar, he's always had a little bit of that Jimi Hendrix style. You can hear that he's a big fan of Jimi Hendrix and his especially the Mahogany Rush stuff. This one is just heavy, and it's killer. I really dug this album. And I think Scott mentioned that this was one of his favorites, if I remember correctly, and I can definitely see why. I would recommend any Frank Marino, but especially that one. This is Shy, their second album. I think Marino just showed their first album, which is one I'm really looking forward to checking out. This one is more of a pop metal, and from what I understand, their first album was straight up new wave of British heavy metal. And this one still has some great stuff on it, but it's definitely that 80s pop metal sound. I talked about this one in an earlier video. This album is amazing. This is mid-70s hard rock. This one's a real hard one to find. It goes for crazy money. I picked it up at a store that didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was. It just looked like hard rock to me, so I grabbed it. And then got home and looked it up. And like I said, it goes for anywhere from 40 to 80 bucks. And they just did a deal with Rockadrome about 2 years ago. And released an album with Rockadrome that contains everything they ever recorded other than the stuff on this album. And it's actually got the same album cover, but it's a colored version of it. So I'll be ordering that from Rockadrome pretty soon. But if you run across this, grab it, because it's a killer album. It's got elements of psych. I mentioned this in one of my, maybe the last video or 2 videos ago. It came out in the mid-70s, but it's still got that late 60s psych vibe to it. Definitely hard rock though. Really cool album. Another absolute favorite of mine is Riot Live. I've had this multiple times. It's just a killer live set, live EP. Highly recommended. I may have shown this one before, I'm not sure. I ran across a real clean copy of Shout at the Devil, and it turned out that it was a Canadian pressing. So I couldn't pass it up. Secret Theaters from Blue Oyster Cult. This one is the jacket's kind of trash. It's probably a G+, but the vinyl is near mint, so I grabbed it. I almost passed it up just based on the condition of the jacket, and I'm glad I didn't, because this is I love this album. I love BOC's hits, you know, Godzilla, Don't Fear the Reaper, but they have so many amazing songs that just don't get airplay, and this album is full of them. It's a killer album. So this album, man, I saw somebody post this on the VC. I ran across it a few days later and grabbed it. It's listed as hard rock. Nantucket. Wouldn't recommend this at all. There's 1 or 2 songs on the A side that are kind of hard rockers, and the rest of it's like 70s pop. Just, I like 2 songs. The rest of it I thought was garbage. If you're a fan of it, I'm sorry. It's just not for me. And if I remember correctly, I think they lost their record deal after that album too. These next 2 were 2 more that I got for really cheap. I think I paid $15 total for both of these, and the vinyl itself is in mint condition in both cases. We got Hurricane Eyes, and then Lightning Strikes from Loudness. These are 2 of my favorites. This is one of those bands that I actually think got better as they went along. Unfortunately, Nihada left the band. I think after these 2, these were his last 2. He ended up coming back about 15 years later, and from what I understand, they've put out some really good albums in the last 10 years or so. However, none of them have ever been sold in the US, so if you run across any of their more recent albums, I recommend checking them out. I haven't heard them yet. I'm looking forward to finding them. But, and I don't think they're on vinyl. I think it's CD only, but I know that they have put out some newer albums in the last 10 years or so with him singing again. I also picked up an absolute favorite of mine. I think I paid $6 for this ship. I was kind of blown away. It was one of those things I put in the bid with 5 days left, thinking I would have to up it a few times, and I didn't. Whitecross, self-titled album. I've talked about this probably a dozen times. Whitecross was the first heavy metal concert I went to, and it was when they were touring for this album. It was a small venue. It was actually an oversized pizza parlor, and there were about 150 people there inside of the pizza parlor in Phoenix. Killer show, killer band. You know, I've loved them ever since. Picked up Great White Shot in the Dark. This one, I love these things. A lot of people don't. This is Masters of Metal. One of the K-Tel comps. I learned about so many new bands from these K-Tel, and there was one other company that I remember making the cassettes. This is the first time I've had one. Actually, I've got one or two other K-Tel on vinyl, but growing up, I never had them on vinyl. I had the cassettes, and you would go and buy them for like $3.99 or $4.99 at like Circle K's and 7-Elevens. And I learned about so many new bands. I was turned on to so many new bands, like Dawkins. I heard the first time. I want to say maybe even Krokus. Bands like that, that didn't get a lot of MTV play that I remember. I learned about from these different comps. And this one's really good. It's got Trash from Black Sabbath, which is one of the Gillan tracks. Y&T, Dawkins, Zebra, Dio, Krokus, Kiss, Twisted Sister, Iron Maiden, Rainbow, Triumph. Really good mix. This one I've wanted for a while. It was on sale, so I finally pulled the trigger on this one. This is the most recent pressing of Schizophrenia from Sepultura. I love this album. It's funny. I actually didn't like it when I first bought it. I was first turned on to Sepultura right when Chaos came out, and fell in love with them immediately. And then a few years later, Roots came out, which I loved. I saw them a couple times on the Roots tour before they unfortunately Max left the band. And I hated this when I first heard it because it was so raw. And now I actually love it because it's so raw. And I was actually, I've talked about this before, I've been reading Max's autobiography lately. I go back and forth between that and something else I'm reading, but he talks about this album, and I never noticed it. His guitar is out of tune for the entire album. And the producers, none of them noticed it. And I just found that amusing, because it's just an amazing sounding album. This is actually the first album with Andreas Kisser as well. I've talked about Sepultura a bunch. They're one of my favorite bands, probably top 5 favorite bands of all time. And it's actually kind of sad that the band is still out there under that name. They should have. I honestly think they should have dropped that name when Max left the band. But now that Paolo Jr. is the only original member still in the band, I don't think they should be calling themselves Sepultura. Not that they haven't released a couple of good albums with the new singer and with the new lineup. They have released one or two that I dug, but it's just not Sepultura. You don't have Max, you don't have Igor. They were the core of the band. They made the sound. You know what I mean? And like I said, I just don't think it should be Sepultura anymore. But regardless, this is the Metal Blade repress. I think they did 1,000 of these, and it's on clear blue vinyl. Finally found a copy of this in decent condition. I've been looking for this forever. Maiden Japan. This is actually one of my favorite live Maiden albums, and the main reason for that is I've always had a problem with the hollowness, and a lot of people think I'm crazy. I've always thought the guitar sounded really thin on their live albums, and I've got this one too. This is Made in England '88, which is, don't get me wrong, it's an amazing concert. The band sounds great. The problem I've always had with Iron Maiden is they have multiple guitars and they play the exact same riff, and they play it in the exact same tuning. So to me, they just kind of bleed together. It does. Normally, when you have a band with 2 guitars, it sounds a lot thicker, a lot fuller. And for some reason, I've never. What's the other one? Live After Death. I think it's the same way. Everybody thinks that's one of the best live albums ever, and I think it's a great live album. Don't get me wrong. I know people are going to argue with me about this, but I've always thought it sounded thin. And for some reason, Made in Japan doesn't. It's always sounded really full to me, and that's why it's always been one of my favorite live albums. And it's got 2 favorites of mine. It's got Killers and Wrathchild, which are both amazing songs. But if you haven't checked this one out, I highly recommend it. But again, that's not to say I like Live After Death. I really enjoyed this. I'll listen to this, you know, again. But I've just always thought that the guitar sounds thin. And it's really funny because I've seen them live and it sounds really thick and full when you see them live, but then I see DVDs of their live shows and it sounds really thin. So I don't know if it just doesn't translate to media or what it is, but it's something I've always had a problem with. And then the last couple, this is a kind of a cool one. This is Witness. I had never heard of this band before. I kind of got it based on the picture, and then I looked it up, I think on Discogs, on the fly, and saw that it was hard rock and grabbed it. There's a couple real shredders on here. The rest of it's just straight up 80s hard rock, almost a mix between, I would say, kind of a mix between Bon Jovi and Heart. It is a female-fronted band. She does have an amazing voice, and I really enjoy listening to this. The real standout was the guitar work, and then I found out later that it was Damon Johnson, who is the current guitarist for Deep Purple and also for Black Star Riders, I think is the name of the band. But the guitar work's amazing. Like I said, there's a couple songs that absolutely shred on here. If they took out the keyboard or the synth, it would be an awesome album. I think the synth kind of takes away from it, which is the case with a lot of these mid to late 80s hard rock bands and metal bands. You know, they added in that the keyboardist, and it just kind of hurt the sound. There's a couple songs in here where it kind of helps, but for the most part, had they left that out completely, this would have been a 10 times better. But and then last up, just an absolute classic. I love this band. I've had this before on CD. This is my first time having it on vinyl. I still want their first album though. Another female-fronted band. This is Smash Gladys, Social Intercourse. This one's a white label promo. Just one of my favorite sleaze bands. They just do such a good, especially with a female singer. Sleaze with a female singer, it doesn't get much better than that. But and again, that's a white label promo. And I got that one for cheap too. I think I paid $10 for it. Definitely worth it though. Sounds amazing. That's it, VC. Another hard rock and heavy metal update. I've still got a lot of stuff to listen to. I probably got another 20 or 30 hard rock and heavy metal albums that I just haven't gotten to yet. And I'll probably be doing another country update in the next week or so here. So that's pretty much it, VC. Have a good one and take care.